My dissertation advisor, Dr. Steve Weiland of Michigan State University, once let me in on a professional secret within American higher education. It was an important insight. I was meeting with him, and I just thanked him for taking time to meet with me, but I prefaced it by saying, "I know you are busy." And he very quickly, he'd often do this, perk up, and be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Jeff, listen, academics, we always think we're so busy. Beginning of the academic year, I can't meet, I'm too busy. Mid-year, I'm too busy, I'm writing my conference paper. Near the end of the semester, I'm too busy, I'm going to the conference, or I just got back from the conference. End of the semester, I can't meet, I'm so busy, it's the end of the semester. He said, Jeff, my job gives me a ton of autonomy in how I use my time. And it also pays me to meet with students. So don't ever apologize for interrupting my busy schedule. So speaking to you as faculty and administrators within higher education, perhaps you could relate to Dr. Weiland's anecdote. As academics, there's always the temptation to wear busyness on our sleeve like a badge of honor. The frantic pace is often baked into the institutional ethos of our institutional life. And far too often, the life-giving elements of our academic vocations are eclipsed by the busyness of the work that we're required to participate in our teaching, in research, or in administratively leading departments or divisions or entire institutions, or through our service, through committee meeting after committee meeting after committee meeting. Yeah, if Weiland's observations are correct, perhaps the hurried pace is both self-inflicted and self-inflated to demonstrate the significance of our work and the relevance of our contributions to higher education. But the vocational tragedy is that somewhere along the way, we lose ourselves in the flurry. It's within this academic culture that the Jacobsens call us towards the path of contemplation. They call us towards a quiet and reflective posture so that we might understand reality as it truly is. And arguably, there is no better exemplar for a contemplatist than Trappist monk Thomas Merton. And the chapter does a wonderful job capturing the ethos of Merton's writing and synthesizing Merton's epistemic posture, arguing that the goal of contemplation is to observe ourselves as we truly are. So in order to expand on the pathway of contemplation specifically within Christian higher education, my response will first highlight some of the environmental challenges which we face in higher education and those challenges which perpetuate a sense of incongruence within us as it relates to our academic work. And second, I'll respond to those problems and just offer some minor suggestions that will help us as professionals in higher education lean into a more congruent sense of self through contemplation. So if the goal of contemplation is to observe ourselves as we really are, or simply just to be oneself, it's no surprise then that we find resistance to this contemplative spirit. The moment we look inward, we must confront the fractured natures of our souls. We're faced with incongruency. So specifically, within our intellectual lives, the Jacobsens remind us of this pattern within higher education that discourages contemplative thinking. First, we're caught in the tyranny of metrics. The Jacobsens argue that every aspect of undergraduate education is measured and assessed according to economics, according to the logic of the market. And so from this, both administrators and faculty, we get this, we're motivated to increase productivity, increase profit margins. Interestingly enough, just earlier this month, Christianity Today published an article on the existential threat for religious education, as federal regulations may limit funding to programs wherein graduates must demonstrate a certain level of profitability against their peers. Since when was being a pastor profitable? Since when was teaching and mentoring undergraduate ministry students or seminarians, when was that profitable? When were we supposed to be motivated by the profits of that work? So as financial pressures increase from a variety of constituents, we have a tendency to conform to the expectations of others. And that could be something either for assessment or accreditation, not necessarily bad things in and of themselves. But what happens is it's this publish or perish on steroids. It becomes be profitable or perish. So within this pattern, our vocational selves become further fractured. We lose ourselves. So as the demands and expectations of our profession increase, we begin to conform to others' expectations. The Jacobsens highlight this phenomenon, saying that over time, people become whoever other people want them to be. They gradually lose trust with their true selves and endure only by staying sufficiently busy to never have time to think about who they really are. So in a sense, we wear masks. We have a professional charade of someone or something we are not. And we hide ourselves from our colleagues, from our students, maybe even from our families. But worst of all, I think we hide ourselves from ourselves. So within this pattern, it's no surprise then that this incongruent self becomes fueled by productivity, fueled by busyness. The temptation for the false self is always to work hard enough to prove your relevance, or work hard enough and stay busy enough that you're distracted from paying attention to what's inside. I appreciate in writing on the discipline of contemplative prayer in his classic book, Celebration of Disciplines, Richard Foster says, in contemporary society, the devil majors in three things: noise, hurry, and crowds. And if Foster is correct, it's no surprise then that the flurry of academic activity then becomes our own living hell, as so often our meaningful work is co-opted by the frantic pace of the academic calendar or the ceaseless clamor of academic noise. There's always another email to send, always another class to prepare for, always another budget to scour over, and always another academic journal to skim. Our vocations become ever more eclipsed by the busyness of our lives, by the busyness of the academy. But amidst these challenges, I believe the pathway of contemplation may serve as a welcomed invitation for administrators and faculty within higher ed, as the pathway of contemplation is this intellectual posture of stepping out, slowing down, giving yourself space to identify the places of congruence and incongruence within your heart and within your soul. Now, recall, the goal of contemplative intellect is to be one's self. The pathway towards this congruent self is paved through ritual. In citing Kathleen Norris, a modern-day poet, author, and mystic, the Jacobsens argued that few people have sufficient self-control to simply apply the brakes and start contemplating. In light of this human limitation, rituals are important because they insert moments of cessation into every day. I love that line. Insert moments of cessation into every day. Yes, we as faculty and administrators were bounded by limitations on our time. Often our weeks might be, dictated by a 4-4 teaching load with the spare hours filled with grading, mentoring students, or committee work. And for many of us, research and writing are at best caught within the margins of the week, or maybe even sequestered off into the months of June and July. But amidst the demands, the contemplative pathway invites us to ritually insert moments of cessation into everyday life. Or as Dallas Willard first said, we need to ruthlessly eliminate hurry. In order to grow in awareness of our true self, the congruent self, the contemplative tradition invites us to cease activity and insert moments of ritual silence and ritual prayer. So where in your life do you encounter silence? Maybe not silence, but where in your life do you at least encounter quiet? For the contemplative, silence must precede prayer, lest your prayer devolves into empty words as another box to be checked off the to-do list. In citing Merton, the Jacobsens highlight the necessity of silence in that it's the indescribable reality of who we are and what other people are can only be known when the clamor of the outside world has been muted and the noise of a person's own voice has been stilled. If we want to know our true selves, we need ritual silence. And truthfully, silence is the hardest part of the contemplative path. The best book I've ever read on contemplative prayer is from Martin Laird, Into the Silent Land. It's a wonderful book published by Oxford University Press. But Laird shares Merton's value of silence, suggesting this. He says, contemplative prayer does not produce this hidden self, this true self, but this facilitating the falling away of everything that obscures it. Silence, Laird says, is not something that we need to acquire, but is something already within us, grounding all our mental processes. Laird encourages us that silence is readily available, should we choose to lean into it. So what does this look like? Where is there silence within your week? Where is there ritual silence within your day? It may be in your office space, at your desk, where maybe you give yourself permission to be unproductive, not to merely waste time, but to slow down and to silently savor time. And maybe it's not at your desk. I imagine if you're a provost, it's not a quiet place. Or a president, your desk is not a quiet place. So maybe it will be elsewhere on campus. Maybe it's imperative of us to schedule one-on-ones with your true self. Put it in your Outlook calendar, 10 to 15 minutes. Or if that is just a little too easy, schedule it as confronting your false self. But just carve out time. Spend time with yourself. Or walking across campus to a classroom or to a meeting. Practice a silent awareness. Ask yourself, where am I at emotionally? What do I feel physically? What's at the forefront of my mind stepping into this space? And what happens as we invite silence into those, ritual habits of walking to and from across a campus, we allow ourselves to enter those spaces showing up truly as who we hope we are. Or collectively, where in your classes, in your teaching, or in the meetings that you lead, is there space for quiet? Is there space for silence? To become oneself, one true and congruent self, we must begin with silence. For only in silence does the true self emerge. But for the Christian contemplative, silence evolves into prayer. In his book, No Man is an Island, I love how Thomas Merton says the following on prayer. He says, prayer is the movement of trust, of gratitude, of adoration, or of sorrow that places us before God, seeing both him and ourselves in the light of his infinite truth. We need the light of God's infinite truth to reveal to us what is real about who we truly are. And so from centering prayer to breath prayer, or from the Jesus prayer to the Ignatian prayer of examine, the Christian tradition has centuries of writing on the contemplative stream, guiding us to the light of God's revelation. Because contemplative prayer changes us. That is, it moves us from a place of incongruency to a place of congruency. And the key for this transformation is consistency. So where in your life is prayer routinely engaged? Are there moments within your week or within your day where you hear the chimes of the monastic bell and you are reminded to pray? And by the monastic bell, I'm talking about the natural places within your given week where you are able to slow down and let the light of God's infinite truth rest on you. Rest on your worries, your fears, your anxieties. Rest on your failures, your provocations, your anger. Because if we do not routinely pray through the complexity of our vocational lives, our false self will fester with fears and inhibitions. So contemplative prayer often requires some prescribed word, verse, or passage to what Laird calls to center what Laird calls the wild hawk of the mind. And especially within the workplace, distractions abound. So find something to pray that helps you focus. Has there been a word, phrase, verse that has recently stirred your soul? Contemplative prayer can be as simple as returning to that passage, turning it over and over in your mind, not for the mere memorization of it or to merely control it, but to savor it, to explore it, to search it for deeper truths and deeper revelations. It could be as simple as the Lord's Prayer, but don't just recite it, contemplate it. I know for myself, I honestly can't get beyond the Our Father without thinking about the paternal nature of who God, our Creator, is. You can also turn to more standardized prayers, such as a popularized collection. It's a good collection, Every Moment Holy. Or you can look to the more ancient practices of praying the hours of morning, midday, evening, or Compline prayer. If you don't have the Book of Common Prayer where these are found, the Daily Office app is a wonderful resource that draws all the scripture and the passages together for you. One final suggestion for a ritual prayer. I specifically appreciate how the Jacobsens highlighted the Ignatian prayer of examine. This reflective prayer is simple. It's a process of expressing gratitude, asking for guidance, honestly reviewing the day, request healing and forgiveness, and resolve to live a better tomorrow. This examine prayer helps us be honest with ourselves as we critically evaluate that which we are attached to in life. It helps us evaluate that which fuels our incongruent selves and inhibits the flourishing of our true self. And I think the prayer of examine is a wonderful vocational tool for those of us in higher education. Think with me, how much more enriching would campus life be if on a commute home or the final 15 minutes at your desk, you could express gratitude? Especially maybe for those difficult students or difficult colleagues that you face. Ask for guidance, especially for those nuanced decisions that need to be made, or those incredibly complex and difficult institutional decisions. Honestly review the day. If you appeared like a fool in a meeting or maybe dropped the ball in teaching, honestly reviewing the day is great, because you remember that your profession amounts to a whole lot more than just one day of you showing up at the job. request healing and forgiveness. We all need healing and forgiveness, because I think then through that, we're able to resolve to live a better tomorrow. So to become oneself, one true and congruent self, we must return to God in prayer. For it's only through the light of God's infinite truth that our true selves are revealed. In conclusion here, the Jacobsens remind us for the necessity of the contemplative pathway, saying the world needs people who know themselves. Christian higher education needs professionals who know themselves, professionals who know that they are greater than the output of their labor, greater than the merits of their awards and accolades, and also greater than any criticism or critique they receive. And perhaps then we, embracing the contemplative pathway, may find ourselves a little less busy and a little more present for our students, for our colleagues, and most importantly, for our true and congruent selves. Thank you. Thank you. I think rather than use Menti, I'd love for you, I had a backup slide because I wasn't sure, but I'd love for us maybe just take a couple minutes at the table to discuss with one another. We get some conversation going. Like, where do you find congruence between your academic work and your inner life? And maybe I don't know, maybe you need to just even introduce yourself to those at the table, but let's just focus on this question, or if you get bored with that, we could jump to this next one. Where in your professional space do you find space for contemplation, for silence or prayer? So let's just take a couple minutes and discuss these questions at the table. Thank you.